Welcome to this video, and I've been looking forward to this for some time. We're going to be talking to Dr. Mel McCann, who's a general practitioner, a doctor in Queensland, Australia. And I think the story is she's become increasingly concerned about vaccine injuries and is now, I think, a leading advocate for those with vaccine injuries. So Mel, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Now you've actually been sent for what was the phrase? Caution and re-education.
Yes, that's true. So I have become a bit more, I guess, vocal in terms of some of my concerns that I've got about the vaccines, and as part of that, after a lot of letter writing and reaching out to officials and voicing my concerns, I accepted an invitation to do a public speaking event. And at that event, I spoke a bit about what I'd seen. The class action that I was instigating, which was filed just a couple of months after that. And as a consequence of that speaking event, I had a complaint to the medical board, AHPRA and the national boards, and that went through its process of, I guess, investigating that complaint. And then what the board decided was to caution me and to submit me to a re-education program on the benefits and risks of the COVID vaccines.
So after many years of medical practice, it's time for re-education. A little patronising perhaps, but let's go back a bit. When the COVID vaccines first came out, what was your thinking on that? What happened?
My thinking initially was very, I think like most doctors, most medical professionals, positive, enthusiastic. Let's get this done.
The way out of the pandemic.
Exactly right. The way out of the pandemic. Probably didn't view it too differently to flu vaccine campaigns, which obviously I've played a big part of throughout my career. So initially positive. I put in to be involved in the vaccination rollout in my community, and optimistic, I would say, was probably my feeling around the vaccines. And it was probably around the end of 21 when I started to see some adverse events that patients were reporting, and these were happening soon after having the vaccine. And it was very different to what I'd ever seen in any of our, annual influenza vaccine rollouts, or what we would see in the pattern after, say, the childhood vaccines. In that we were having so many patients coming in and reporting chest pain and blood clots, strokes, and I'm only in a small rural area, and so, it really just raised alarm bells for me around that time as something was different about these vaccines.
So these patients were coming to you as their doctor saying, look, doctor, I've got a chest pain, or I've got these symptoms that you hadn't had before. So you were seeing almost like a new syndrome. What made you link that with the COVID vaccines?
Well, I think it was the time proximity to having the vaccine, so what's called a temporal relationship. And before I did medicine, I did pharmacy, and so I had a bit of an understanding of adverse drug reactions and how they're recognised and how they should be reported. And one of the most important factors in considering whether something that happens is related to a medication or a vaccine is that what's called temporal relationship. So did it happen after the vaccine, and how soon after did it happen? And it was just these types of events that were happening from someone who had none of those types of symptoms beforehand, no other risk factors, nothing else had changed. And then they would have the vaccine, and then within sometimes even hours or days, they were developing chest pain. And quite a number of those patients actually were later formally diagnosed as having myocarditis, which is of course now recognised and known to be one of the adverse events from the vaccines.
And there was consistency. You were seeing this in a cohort of patients, basically. They were having this same coincidental or not temporal correlation. And were you seeing chest pain in people you wouldn't expect to see chest pain, younger patients?
Yeah, it was. It was often younger people and teenagers even, and both themselves, their parents were reporting their concerns that maybe this was related to the vaccine. So, for example, someone who was fit and healthy and playing sport, and they took the vaccine so that they could continue to play sport once mandates were rolled out, and then develop chest pain soon afterwards. So it was I guess just increasing evidence from not just the patients themselves, but people that were around them were reporting this change in what had happened to them.
And clinically, you adjudicated this chest pain was from the heart. Seemed to be heart-related pain.
Yeah, well, in a lot of these patients, what they were reporting was exertional chest pain, so pain that was worse when they exerted themselves. And I guess that's such a red flag for
angina.
Exactly, yeah, for heart-related types of pain. And some of them were, I think, being really appropriately worked up with an emergency. They were having troponin levels done, they were having ECGs done, but some of these patients were also reporting that they were just being sent home and told that they had anxiety, and then it was only later that it was discovered it was related to the heart.
I've had so many reports around the world of that people reporting physical symptoms and it's being told it's psychological stroke psychiatric, which of course is a big no-no in medicine. Never assume something is of a mental nature until you've excluded the physical. So
exactly,
that's a global unfortunate thing that's gone wrong in a lot of doctors' thinkings around the world. So you had these concerns. What did you do next?
Well, actually, this was around the end of 21, and the first thing I did was go to the database of adverse events, which I hadn't looked at that in a few months, and I recall this vividly because it was around the end of November of 2021, and there was a reported death in a teenager, and there was a number of teenagers who'd been reported to have had cardiac arrests, and there was just an extraordinary number of really severe adverse events that had been reported to the TGA. And of course that doesn't automatically follow that those were caused from the vaccine, but the fact that they were being reported in such high numbers, I found that really alarming. That in conjunction with the change that I had seen just within my own rural community. So I wrote straight away to the head of the TGA, John Skerritt, and the then Health Minister, Minister Hunt, and outlined what I had observed, the concerns that I had, just brought their attention to some of these cases that were reported on the database. And actually I asked for a suspension of the program, and that I thought that the safety issues should be quite urgently evaluated.
And you were putting in reports to the TGA about the adverse reactions you were seeing yourself?
Yeah, I think it seemed like everyone was doing that reasonably diligently, just from the amount of reports that had been made.
And did you get positive feedback from the TGA? Did they say, thank you, doctor, for alerting us to this potential risk, we will take action on it straight away? No,
and I think it's funny to look back now. I think I was naive. I actually did think I would get a response like that. I mean, that has happened before. The doctors reported in 2010 a change to the pattern of adverse events after one of the influenza vaccines in children.
Yep.
And within a matter of weeks, they suspended the whole program. And honestly, I thought that that's what would happen this time. It wasn't. I got back a response from John Skerritt, essentially attempting to reassure me that sadly enough, 158, I think, young people die suddenly each year, and that those events are going to be coincidental if they're reported soon after the vaccine, and that they were satisfied that there weren't any safety issues or
safe and effective.
Exactly, that was the reassurance.
Indeed, right. And then how did you get into this disciplinary issue? What was the trigger for that?
Yeah, well, that was actually over a year later. So from that point, I guess I didn't give up on it, and I think that was really driven by patients that I was seeing, and then increasingly patients who were contacting me and other doctors who were contacting me from around the country who were having similar concerns about the safety issues. And so I continued to write letters. I made a number of Freedom of Information requests. From that point, I sort of came to the opinion that these patients weren't being looked after by the compensation scheme, so they were having enormous difficulty with the eligibility criteria for the scheme and with being knocked back even if they met the criteria. And I started to wonder if there would need to be some sort of legal recourse for people whose lives had been undeniably changed by what had happened to them from the vaccine. So I worked on that process for about a year, and then it was early 2023 when I suppose for the first time said something more publicly about the concerns that I had, what I had learned from the from the Freedom of Information request that I had made, and also publicly announced the class action which was soon to be filed. And I got a complaint to the medical board from someone in the audience who made a complaint about the things that I said in that talk, that public talk. And then there was the process from there where that complaint was investigated by the medical board, and then ultimately the decision to caution and require me to re-educate. Yeah, indeed.
So you saw it as your role to advocate for your patients, and one, of course, we support completely. All healthcare providers should be advocates for their patients. And you took that down the way that this class action, what does that involve?
Yeah, well, and I should say, John, not even just that I saw it as my role to advocate, but I see it as a requirement. The Medical Board Code of Conduct actually states that if a safety issue is raised, and if it's raised by a colleague, that we ought to support that colleague, and that we ought to take all actions reasonably necessary to address the safety issue to the public. So, to my way of thinking, this was part of that. This was a safety issue that I saw was impacting on the public. And I thought this was important information for the public to be aware of as part of that.
Just part of your job.
Exactly, yeah, a part of what's required. But in amongst all of that, yes, indeed, a class action is something that I've been involved in instigating, and where that's at now, there's now well over 1,000 people who have joined that, and that's been filed in the federal court about a year ago, and we have our first case management meeting actually coming up on the 12th of April this year. And what that action is, it's seeking compensation for the injuries that have been suffered, injuries and bereavements, and it's seeking that against the regulator, so the TGA, the Health Department of Health, and there's people who were involved in the decision making within those organisations. And what it's alleging is negligence and misfeasance in the actions of those individuals in approving and in their ongoing approval and safety monitoring of the vaccines. And it's alleging that those actions weren't done according to the Therapeutics Good Act and other relevant sort of acts and guidelines, and the requirement for safety for the medication's approval.
So you're advocating actually for this almost a test case of 1,000 people who have vaccine injuries that are going through this court system at the moment.
Yeah, and in fact, it's open. In Australia, the class action system is what's called generally open, so it's an opt-out system, so that anyone who falls under the definition of a group member is actually entitled to join. So it's still open, and people are still joining every day, actually.
And are you getting much support from your medical colleagues? Because presumably these would need to be diagnosed formally in some way.
So when people join, they're submitting their details of what's happened to them, essentially. And then I guess the next stage, I suppose in a sense, the first question that has to be answered within this legal process is that question of was it negligence that has contributed to the injuries of these people. It's being led by three named applicants, I should say. I see. So their details are public, I guess, as part of the claim. Right. The others are just joining if they meet the criteria of group members. And I have had quite a lot of support, quiet support, behind the scenes support, I suppose you could say, from colleagues. I do still have doctors from across the specialties reach out, contact me, express support for what I've been involved in, and we've got quite a team of experts who are willing to provide evidence for this as well. So obviously, I'm just a GP. I've just been involved in beginning this, but there's a legal team and obviously, of course, an expert team that sit behind it all.
And are the regulatory agencies keen to cooperate with this process to find the truth and do the right thing?
Well, I guess as far as the class action goes, I don't think we're going to know that until it starts to move through to the next phases. So that's hopefully what we're going to see happening in the next few months, and we'll see how this case management.
We hope. We'll wait and see on that one.
Yes. Similarly with the medical board, I mean, I was, in regards to the action against me,
Yeah.
I was surprised by that decision actually. But yeah, so I guess from that you could say that they're not particularly supportive of the of my actions.
I can just imagine sitting in a classroom. You will say after me, "COVID vaccines are safe and effective." Do 1,000 lines. It's just quite incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, what are the financial implications of this? I mean, how is this funded?
Yeah, well, the class action is being funded. So I've signed on as funder, and I've contributed quite a lot to this action, and also from public donations. So we've put it out there for the public to donate and support this action, and there have actually been a lot of people that have been supporting this.
And there will be links in the description if you want to contact Mel or the organisation or help in this.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is going to take considerable finances to move it all the way through to the next processes, but we've had quite a lot of support with that, and absolutely, if anyone can support that, would be amazing.
It's just so disappointing that these legal things. I mean, you've put yourself at massive financial risk and loss, which is a noble thing to do. It's just a pity that these legal things are so financially orientated to me. This is a medical question. Why should that have massive financial implications? I find it immensely frustrating.
Yeah, it's been eye-opening for me to see the limitations, I guess, to justice, to the justice system, and the challenges and difficulties for people accessing justice. And you're right, I don't think it should be that way.
And we're not knocking Australia here. I mean, it's the same in my country. It's probably worse in the States, and this is the same everywhere. It's just it seems really unfortunate. So what's the timetable over the next few months, Mel?
Yeah, so 12th of April is the first case management meeting.
Well, what does that actually mean, case management meeting? What will happen there?
Yeah, so it's not, I guess, as far as I understand it, it's not a part of the trial where any of the evidence will be reviewed or anything like that, but it's discussions around things like interlocutory applications, which is where the other side might ask to have it struck out, or they might ask to have a summary judgment, or they might ask for cost security. So
the other side is the TGA?
The respondents. So, yeah, so this is John Skerritt, Greg Hunt, Brendan Murphy, and Paul Kelly as the leaders, I suppose, of the TGA, the health department.
But because they represent us, I think we can look to them to do the right thing here. Let's hope that happens. And this adversarial process will not be necessary, but as we'll see, we'll wait and see on that.
Yeah, it will be interesting because, of course, when
because we're paying these guys. Well, not me personally. I'm not an Australian taxpayer, but you are. You're paying their wages, presumably, or well, that and industry funding, of course.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And, a compensation scheme was promised to people when the vaccines were rolled out, and it was meant to be, as you say, non-adversarial, not expensive. It was meant to be an avenue for people to be able to avoid taking legal action, but it's just been such an unsatisfactory, disappointing process for people, the compensation scheme.
Yeah, it really is a simple clinical decision. There is either vaccine injury or there isn't, and that can be adjudicated by quite a lot of medical criteria, and senior medical people can do that, and really pity it's legalised. So this must have been quite a strain on you personally. Do you want to tell us, or pass that question?
Look, it's been on the one hand, yes, it's been a strain, it's been a stress. I mean, I've never had this type of stress with the medical board or this type of drama, so all of that's stressful. It's expensive to fight it. It's had a number of financial and other consequences for me for sure. But it's just such an important thing that I feel. In that way, it doesn't weigh on me. I just think just the amount of people that I've been into contact with who've been so harmed by the vaccines, whose lives have been just turned upside down. I just feel so strongly that I need to be doing something like this.
And of course, if you didn't do something, you've got to live with yourself for the rest of your life as well. When you know something is wrong, or you firmly believe something to be wrong,
well, exactly, that's
your
right.
Your personal integrity means you need to act on that, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So basically, we're just waiting to see now. We're kind of in this limbo situation, and
waiting to see, I guess, moving through the next phases, getting it financially through the next stages, so getting that support to get it through the next stages, and then seeing what the approach is from the other side, and then watching it progress through the court system, which is definitely going to still take some time.
I am concerned that they might fight you tooth and nail with great ferocity.
I'm sure they will.
I've got a feeling that if people think they may have been less than as dutiful as they could have been, that they may be reluctant to admit that, but let's hope we're proved wrong.
I'm sure that'll be vigorously defended.
I'm sure it will be, which is, again, I mean, to me that's just tragic. Again, it's a medical decision. It should not be adversarial. But it may be that some people in these organisations have got a vested interest in it and want to defend their own previous decision making, and who knows, some people might even be reluctant to admit they were wrong.
I would not be surprised if that's the case.
But we'll find out.
We'll find out how they approach it. But I think no matter the outcome, I think it's going to do some good just from shining a light on what's happened, and even just what's discovered throughout the process, where we'll hopefully have a better understanding of exactly what went on behind this decision making, and I think that in itself will hopefully go some way towards acknowledgement for what's happened to these people as well.
Yeah, and more public acknowledgement of the new pathologies.
Exactly.
These
right.
new diseases are there. People need to be aware of them, doctors need to be aware of them, and we need to be working out the optimum treatment strategies. And whatever's turned out to have caused these new diseases, we need to take away the cause so we don't make the same mistake again.
Exactly.
There's such important implications for the future here.
Exactly.
This is just an example, really, of
I agree completely, John. Particularly, I think, for us in Australia, because I'm not sure if it's the same in the UK, but there's an enormous move towards the mRNA platform, for example.
Massive. Massive.
We've got, I think, 4 factories, each of them to the ability to produce, I think, 100 million vaccines a year each. I mean, that's a phenomenal number of these products.
We have the same. The British government's put $1 billion into Moderna.
Right.
They've started a new plant in, I think, at Harwell Science Park near Oxford. They're going to have a factory to produce 250 million doses a year.
Yeah.
And no questions asked as far as I can see. And there's the same in the States. I'm pretty sure there's a big new factory in Canada. There's a global move towards this. And it all seems really quite strange and remarkably unscientific to me, because we don't have any long-term trial data. And we don't know what these mRNA vaccines are doing, although we do have our suspicions. And until we get the science 100% clear, the safety 100% clear, the efficacy 100% clear, 250 million seems an awful lot of doses to me to start peddling without a very, very firm evidence base.
I agree. And
Massive implications.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a reluctance to even maybe question the science or the safety behind them. So I think these types of legal actions are so important from that perspective as well. It's just, as you say, better understanding of the safety issues and the conditions that we're seeing from the vaccines.
Yeah. Will you keep us updated?
Definitely.
I for one now think you've done a noble thing.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm sure we'll get 1 or 2 comments that agree with that.
Thank you, John. I appreciate everything that you've done as well. I know there's a lot of people within the vaccine industry community that are really grateful for the voice that you've given them too.
Well, you've demonstrated sacrificial advocacy, and that's a great thing, so thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, John.
Thanks.
Would you like to have a property business that generates a 6-figure income? That's what my property